If your doctor told you nothing matters for your morning blood sugar except what you ate at dinner, I need to tell you something that contradicts that advice directly. Researchers studying older adults with type 2 diabetes have identified something most general practitioners still don't bring up in a standard appointment. What you drink in the half hour before bed can move your fasting glucose almost as much as what you ate hours earlier. Some of the drinks people over 60 have switched to, thinking they were the safe choice, bottled herbal teas, diabetic-marketed shakes, sugar-free nighttime blends, are quietly working against them while they sleep. Today, I'm walking you through 5 bedtime drinks with real physiological reasons to lower your morning number, and 3 drinks sitting in pantries right now that are doing the opposite. Pay close attention to the second drink on the good list. It costs less than 50 cents a serving and works through a mechanism most people have never heard of. And the first item on the warning list might surprise you, because it's marketed specifically to people managing diabetes. Before we go further, tell me your average fasting number when you wake up. Drop it in the comments. It helps me know who's actually watching this and what matters most to cover next. And if this is useful, subscribe now, because the goal here is to walk through this like a real consultation, not a quick tip video. Here's what almost nobody over 60 understands about the 8 hours you spend asleep. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, your liver does something it isn't supposed to do if your insulin sensitivity has slipped. It releases stored glucose into your bloodstream through a process your body normally reserves for genuine starvation. This is why a person can go to bed in a perfectly reasonable range and wake up 40 points higher, despite not eating a single bite overnight. The liver staged a release while the rest of the body was unconscious to respond to it. The drinks that actually move this number work on 3 separate fronts. First, they support insulin sensitivity overnight, which makes that liver release smaller and slower. Second, several of them interact with the same hormonal signaling pathway, the incretin system, that newer prescription medications were designed to mimic, nudging the pancreas to be ready before morning rather than caught off guard. Third, and this one gets ignored constantly, they improve sleep quality itself. Deeper, more continuous sleep lowers overnight cortisol, and cortisol is one of the most underestimated drivers of next morning insulin resistance. Get the sleep wrong, and the glucose follows. Let's start with the most accessible one. And I want you to try this one first if you're someone who's already up once or twice a night anyway, because this drink does double duty. Unsweetened almond milk carries only 1 to 2 grams of carbohydrate per cup, compared to roughly 12 in regular dairy milk. That alone makes it a safer base. But the real value is in the magnesium. Almond milk is naturally rich in it, and magnesium is one of the more overlooked minerals in blood sugar management after 60. As kidney function shifts with age, the body holds on to less magnesium and loses more through urine, and low magnesium status has been consistently linked in research to worse insulin sensitivity across nearly every cell type that depends on it. Now add half a teaspoon of true Ceylon cinnamon, not the cheaper cassia cinnamon stocked in most grocery aisles. Ceylon cinnamon carries active compounds that have been shown in multiple smaller trials to support how efficiently glucose transporters move sugar out of the bloodstream and into cells. The effect isn't dramatic on its own, but stacked with magnesium and consumed at the right time, it adds up. Here's the recipe. 1 cup of unsweetened almond milk, warmed gently, never boiled. Half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon stirred in. 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract if you want a hint of sweetness without sugar. Drink it 30 to 60 minutes before lying down. Total cost, well under 50 cents. One caution worth taking seriously. If you're on blood pressure medication, particularly calcium channel blockers, added magnesium can amplify the effect of those drugs. Start with half a portion and pay attention to how you feel. And bring this up with whoever manages your prescriptions before making it a nightly habit. I know what you're thinking with the next one. Apple cider vinegar before bed, on an empty stomach, over 60. Won't that tear up the stomach lining? That's exactly why we're not drinking it alone. Chamomile has been used as a sleep aid for centuries, but its relevance to blood sugar is more recent. Compounds in chamomile bind to calming receptors in the brain, which is why it helps with sleep onset. And there's growing evidence that the same compounds may modestly improve how cells respond to insulin overnight. Pair that with 1 tablespoon of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar, and you get a combination with 2 separate jobs. The acetic acid in vinegar has been shown in published research to blunt the liver's overnight glucose release, essentially putting a brake on that 3 a.m. surge. Chamomile, meanwhile, soothes the stomach lining that vinegar alone tends to irritate, especially once the esophageal sphincter has loosened with age, which is the real reason most people over 60 give up on vinegar tonics within a week. Brew 1 cup of chamomile tea, let it cool to warm, stir in 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar with the mother still in it, and drink it about 45 minutes before bed. If the taste is too sharp, a few drops of liquid stevia soften it without adding carbohydrate. I had a patient, a woman in her late 60s, whose fasting numbers sat stubbornly around the low 150s, despite being consistent with her metformin. We added this exact drink. 6 weeks later, her average had dropped meaningfully, not to a number she'd call perfect, but enough that she stopped dreading the morning meter. She told me the first few nights she hated the taste, and by the second week she looked forward to it as part of winding down. This next one surprises people every time, and it's especially useful if joint discomfort or slow healing has also been part of the picture. Real bone broth, simmered long and slow rather than the boxed stock from a grocery shelf, is rich in glycine, an amino acid that research has connected to improved insulin secretion and lower markers of inflammation in older adults. What gets missed almost entirely is that glycine also nudges core body temperature down slightly before sleep, which is one of the physical signals the brain uses to drop into deeper sleep stages. And deep sleep is precisely when the body does its most efficient work, repairing insulin receptors. The pinch of sea salt in this recipe isn't decoration. After 60, thirst signaling weakens, and mild overnight dehydration is common without anyone noticing. Dehydration concentrates glucose in the blood, which can make a morning number look worse than it actually is. A small pinch of mineral-rich salt helps the body retain the hydration it needs through the night. 8 ounces of real bone broth, warmed gently. A pinch of sea salt, a crack of black pepper to support absorption. Drink it 30 to 45 minutes before bed. If you've been told to limit protein due to kidney concerns, this is one to clear with your doctor first, rather than start on your own. This is the 50-cent drink I mentioned at the start, and if melatonin supplements have been part of your routine, pay close attention here. Tart cherry juice is one of the few natural food sources of melatonin, and separate research on older adults with sleep difficulty has linked it to meaningfully longer sleep duration. What matters for blood sugar specifically is that tart cherries sit at a noticeably lower glycemic index than sweet cherries, and they're dense with anthocyanins, the deep red pigments that have been studied for their role in supporting insulin sensitivity and protecting the very pancreatic cells responsible for producing insulin in the first place. The catch is concentration. Straight tart cherry juice, even unsweetened, carries enough natural sugar that drinking it undiluted before bed defeats the purpose. The ratio that keeps this safe is 2 tablespoons of 100% tart cherry juice diluted into 8 ounces of cool water, which keeps total carbohydrate low while still delivering meaningful anthocyanins and melatonin. Have you tried tart cherry juice before, and did you notice anything in either your sleep or your morning number? Tell me in the comments, other people reading this benefit more from real experience than they do from another statistic. Stay with me, because the most powerful drink on this list works through a mechanism none of the others touch, and it's the one I reach for with patients whose fasting glucose won't budge below 140, no matter what else they try. Fenugreek seeds contain a soluble fiber that, once steeped in hot water, forms a gel-like substance in the digestive tract. That gel physically slows how quickly carbohydrate from dinner gets broken down and absorbed, stretching the glucose release out over a longer window rather than letting it hit all at once. Across a number of clinical trials pooled together, fenugreek supplementation has been associated with meaningful reductions in fasting glucose, reductions that in some comparisons rival what certain oral medications achieve. There's a second layer to this that rarely gets mentioned. A specific amino acid in fenugreek stimulates insulin release only in the presence of elevated glucose, which means it's far less likely to trigger a dangerous overnight low compared to compounds that stimulate insulin regardless of need. 1 teaspoon of fenugreek seeds, available at most international grocery stores for a few dollars a bag, steeped in 8 ounces of just boiled water for a full 10 minutes, then strained. Drink it warm, 30 to 60 minutes before bed. A squeeze of lemon helps if the bitterness is too sharp at first. I worked with a man in his early 70s whose fasting numbers had been parked between 155 and 160 for longer than he wanted to admit. He started fenugreek tea nightly. 8 weeks later, his average had dropped into the high 120s. He told me he didn't believe the meter the first time it read a number starting with 1 instead of 15. One real caution here: fenugreek can interact with blood-thinning medication, and if insulin is part of your regimen, it may intensify its effect. This is not something to layer in quietly. Monitor closely and loop in whoever manages your medication before making it routine. Now, before anyone heads to the kitchen, 3 drinks deserve a warning, because they're marketed as safe and sometimes aren't. Bottled herbal teas sound harmless on the surface. No caffeine, no sugar listed prominently. But natural flavors on an ingredient label is a loophole wide enough to include sweeteners and concentrated fruit extracts that don't have to be itemized the way added sugar does. In small servings, that might not move the needle much on its own, but right before bed, when metabolism is at its slowest point of the day, even a small, unaccounted carbohydrate load can be enough to keep the body out of the fasted state overnight glucose control depends on. If natural flavors sits anywhere near the top of an ingredient list on a bedtime tea, it's worth skipping. Golden milk has become popular for good reason. Turmeric does carry real anti-inflammatory properties. But the pre-made cartons sold at most grocery and coffee chains are often sweetened with coconut sugar, date syrup, or agave, marketed as natural, and still functioning as straightforward glucose load right before 8 hours of sleep. A pancreas processing incoming sugar doesn't distinguish between a natural sweetener and a candy bar. If golden milk is part of the routine, the home version, unsweetened almond milk, turmeric, a pinch of black pepper to help absorption, a drop of stevia if needed, is the version worth keeping. The last one is the one that frustrates me most, because it's aimed directly at people trying to do the responsible thing. Several of the major diabetic-branded nutrition shakes on supermarket shelves carry 20 grams or more of carbohydrate per bottle, often from fast-digesting starches with a glycemic impact higher than people expect from something labeled for blood sugar support. Reviews pooling research on these products have found that, consumed without food and close to bedtime, they can produce a real overnight glucose spike, the opposite of the label's promise. If a bedtime snack is genuinely needed for overnight stability, a small handful of almonds with a piece of real cheese does the job with far less risk and zero marketing spin. Here's how to put this together starting tonight. Pick one of the 5 drinks and commit to it for 2 full weeks before judging whether it's working. The body needs consistency more than it needs the perfect choice. Time it 30 to 60 minutes before lying down, not with dinner, not right as the lights go off. Track your fasting number every single morning over those 2 weeks, because that trend line is more honest than any single day. And tonight, take a look at what's actually in the pantry. If there's a flavored tea with natural flavors near the top, a carton of pre-made golden milk, or a diabetic shake in the fridge, that's worth reconsidering now that you know what's actually in it. Of the 5 drinks covered today, which one are you trying tonight? Tell me in the comments. And if there's someone in your life who's been doing everything right and still waking up frustrated by their numbers, send them this video. They deserve to know what's actually working and what isn't. This video is for education, not a substitute for medical care. Nothing here should change your insulin, metformin, or any other prescribed medication without your doctor's direct guidance. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next one.